I walk through the shadow of death left to fear. This is a journey through the halls of hell.
Yes people, what's good? I'm BA, back again with another movie review, and this week I want to talk about Cube. Now Cube's a movie that came out in 1997 and was completely below my radar the very first day I saw it. I think it was back in the days of rentals and I just gave it a try because it looked quite unique with the box, but I did not know what to expect, and I feel like most people can tell this story when talking about their first experience with Cube. It's a very underrated, below the radar movie, and because of that you'll generally start your viewing experience with quite low expectations as to what you're about to see. The concept is just one of these genius ones you wish you'd have thought of yourself. It starts with a person. Now I know none of these actors, director or writer by the way, so bear with me with my terrible this person, that person-y that is coming up in a second, I'm just warning you. So an individual, I'm going to try and swap the word person for different things. We got individual, person, guy, gal, I'll try and mix them all in together, yeah? This certain someone wakes up in a square room. There is small circular sort of hatches for doors on each of the four walls, and one on the ceiling and one on the floor. So they start in this room, they don't know why they're there, they don't know what they have to do, no one's communicating with them, and they do not remember how they got there. So what do? You pick one of the hatches and you try and go through into another room. This person does that and they find out that all the rooms seem to be made identically. They're all square rooms with these 6 hatches, ceiling, floor and 4 walls. So at first it appears like some sort of maze, but there's no maze to it. They just don't know where they're going. And then all of a sudden, this person goes into a room and is instantly murdered by a booby trap. And boom, that is the premise of our movie. Except they're not the only person who have woken up in this cube. About 6 different people have woken up in this cube. All waking up in different starting rooms, different positions, and eventually they all meet in the same room at a certain point in the film, and by this point various members of this cast have figured out different components to this cube. They realise that some of the rooms are booby trapped, some of the booby traps are motion sensors, some of them are sound, but luckily they have a jailbreaker with them, and this guy knows every trick in the book to how to bypass some booby traps, so he's a good sort of early source of useful information. He tells them to take a button off their shirt to chew it to generate saliva in their mouths. He tells them to remove their shoes and the laces so they can throw their shoes into rooms to check for booby traps and things like that. And then just when you think this guy is the guy that's going to get him out of there, he dies in a room with booby traps. So now there's only 5 of them and the expert is dead. Brilliant way to continue the story. And as always, when you get a bunch of desperate humans trapped in some sort of confusing or tough, life-threatening situation, these things always end up being about the human element. Who's willing to betray someone to avoid a trap? Who wants to use this as an opportunity to have alone time with someone? I'll put it in those terms for YouTube. You know, all the best and worst of humanity are always shown in situations like this, and this film does a great job at displaying some of those. I also realised how similar it actually is as a kind of precursor to Squid Game in a way, and things like Battle Royale. It's almost like a combination of several of them, but also not like any of them. It's like Squid Game if there was no financiers, and no frontman, and no one in communication, no eye in the sky. They literally have not been told why they are there. They don't know whether they're some billionaire's plaything, or some mad scientist's experiment, or they've been abducted onto an alien mothership. They literally have no idea. There is a bit of CGI used with some of the traps that I don't think has aged that well. Probably the worst part of the movie for me is the CGI, but this movie was done on a shoestring budget, and it's one of my favourite things to talk about, and I haven't even got round to it yet. But check this out. So you know how earlier I said this guy wakes up in this room, goes through the first hatch to realise all the rooms are symmetrical? Well, that's because all the rooms were symmetrical because they only built one room as a set, and every other room is just that one room repurposed. So think about the amount of money they were able to save by having this system of every room looking identical, therefore they could film in a single box room set. Absolutely genius, and it brought the budget of this movie down to an absolute shoestring, which allowed it to be, I believe, incredibly profitable upon release. And I always use this movie as my inspiration reputation for what I call writing in boxes. Now, this movie is the literal example of that phrase, but what I mean by writing in boxes is sometimes as a writer, you have to understand that your grandiose idea would have to reach the ears of someone who could bankroll a $500 million budget in order to film your vision. It's not smart to always write a script like that because you are instantaneously limiting the options of people you can pitch it to who actually see it as a filmable movie. So sometimes when I'm writing screenplays, I write in what I call boxes, meaning I purposely limit the budget, limit the cast, limit the amount of sets or locations just so that I know that if I can cram good ideas within that, it is certainly filmable by someone, an independent filmmaker, or someone with a smaller budget could read through this and go, you know, we could actually film this with not too much money. So sometimes I try to write like that myself, and I feel like anybody who's ever tried to make a film has unfortunately sometimes had to limit their creative scope to fit financial constraints. And it's obviously a bad thing because creativity should be completely free. This is something novelists never have to deal with. They can write anything they want and there's no budget to the words. But yeah, because I understand the difficulty of it, you also see the genius in one of these premises when they do pay off, such as Cube. Another one is, the Colin Farrell movie, Phone Booth. The fact that 95% of those scenes could be filmed at a singular phone booth is so clever to me for budget purposes, etc. And it just goes to show that it's always about the idea, not the grandioseness, the scope, the scale, what you see on screen. I wish George Lucas had listened to this review and had recorded it 20 years earlier before he made the Star Wars prequel movies, but shit, what can you do? And also, I do believe there is a sequel to Cube, and also strangely, they made a Korean or Japanese, remake of this movie just a few years ago, which I've also heard is pretty shitty, so I've purposely stayed away from any additional Cube material, even though I feel like it is rife for a really good sequel, but part of me doesn't want an explanation. You know, spoiler alert, this film ends without them actually explaining what it all is, who made it, why they were there. They just choose not to explore those questions, and it causes the film to forever have an air of mystery to it that it wouldn't have had if they'd have just used those last 10 minutes explaining everything. Now, I'm not one of these people that doesn't want things explained. Most times that would infuriate the shit out of me to not get an explanation as to how any of it works. But for some reason, in Cube's very unique instance, it works brilliantly. I wouldn't change a thing, and it heightens its legendary status in my mind that they just kept all that mysterious. So yeah, if you haven't seen Cube, check it out, because I promise you, if you're one of these people that likes mystery or science or Squid Game type stuff even, it'll draw you in, and then you'll just be impressed with how much they get out of so little. And my final thought is, when thinking about it, it's actually quite a rare achievement that a film can be a good example on multiple fronts. And as a writer, it's a great example on how to write something that can be done on a small budget. As a director, it shows how you can drastically reduce your budget just by repurposing singular sets, etc., and still making your movie look great. And on top of it working as movie making examples, the most important third layer is it works as an entertaining, interesting, mysterious movie all on its own. So yeah, that has been my review of Cube. I've been BA. If you've enjoyed this review, like, comment, subscribe, come join the Patreon and help support me personally. And until next week, peace.